Sales Babble is sponsored by Vidyard, a video solution for sales professionals. Are you struggling to get in front of the decision maker? Are you calling and emailing and it's just not getting any traction? Are you talking to a prospect and it's just dawned on you this person doesn't have the authority to buy? Today's guest has a solution to this vexing challenge. Oscar Chavez is a member of the Board Management Consulting Service. He shares with you the steps for executive engagement, how to manage large strategic deals, and avoid getting trapped by non-decision makers.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Welcome, Oscar. Are you ready to babble?
I sure am, Pat. Looking forward to it.
Oscar, I'm happy to have you here on the podcast. You and I have been chit-chatting back and forth on LinkedIn. In fact, we are actually on a video call last week. And we have a common interest in B2B sales, in the enterprise sale. And there's something I really want to talk to you about, because this is something that I just bumped into in regards to a client of mine, in that she's been talking to an awful lot of people in this one organization, trying to get them to close, trying to get the ball over the goal line, but it's just not happening.
Yeah.
And I know you're all about having executive engagement, and I'm thinking it's probably because of something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I come across all the time, Pat, and I have a name for it, and I apologize for anyone that I offend for saying this, but this is just what I call it because I think it's funny. But I call it nerd syndrome, and what that really means is that a lot of sales reps spend time with non-decision makers within their key accounts. Here's the thing about life, Pat, is that the people with the least amount of money and the least amount of authority are more than happy to spend time with you and listen to everything you have to say, listen to the technology, understand what it can do to make their jobs easier. But at the end of the day, they don't have decision-making authority. And so a lot of salespeople, a lot of enterprise sales reps, BDMs, anyone in that nature will spend a lot of time with non-decision makers and feel like they're doing a great job because they go home at the end of the day, or at least now in today's world, we just log off the computer. And we feel like we've done a good job because we've had the meetings, we've evangelized the technology. But what we've not done is with crystal clear intention gone after the decision makers. And the truth about life is that where the focus flows, the results go. And so if we want more results, if we want to accelerate deals, if we want to do bigger, better deals, then we have to focus on executive engagement. And I do come across sales reps at times, because I do a lot of coaching and mentoring for sales reps. And they just say to me, Oscar, I just can't get in front of executives. And I guarantee if I was to get a copy of their inbox and I was to go into their sent items, I guarantee there's not going to be very many emails that have been sent to executives. And that means that the focus isn't there. So when people are really struggling to get that executive engagement or get in front of decision makers, part of the reason is because they really haven't focused on it. And so if people want to do bigger, better deals, increase transaction sizes, circumvent the amount of no that they always get, then they've really got to focus on executive engagement.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it? You don't want to be rude. You don't want to be pushy. You don't want to be that jerky guy and go over somebody's head, right? That's something I hear all the time. Like, oh, if I talk to their bosses, they're going to be angry with me. They're going to be pissed at me. Then what happens?
Yeah, that is so classic, Patrick, and it is something that happens all the time. And for me, I've actually been in a situation where I've really pissed off one of my stakeholders. I won't call him a decision maker. He was a stakeholder. And he said to me, he sat me down because I'd met with his boss, and he found out I actually had met his boss's boss as well. He didn't even know this. But he was the GM of operations. Like, he was a senior guy within the bank. And I remember he sat me down and he looked at me in the eye. He was red. His face was red. His eyes were almost watering. And he said, "You know what, Oscar? You made me really furious when you went and met my boss behind my back without my permission." He's like, "I want to know every time you're going to meet someone within this bank, because it makes me look bad if you're out there having a chat to everyone." And I said to him, I'm going to give him a name. I'll call him John. We'll call him John. And I said, look, John, with all due respect, my role is to be all over the organization, to talk to everyone in every single level, In fact, not only have I met your boss, and I didn't know he was your boss when I met with him, but I actually met with his boss as well. I met with the chief risk officer. And so, Martin, with all due respect, my job is to actually meet multiple stakeholders within the business and understand their requirements so that that can feed into your overall strategy. Now, moving forward, what would you like me to do? Would you like an email notification when I'm going to meet these people within the bank? And he said yes. And then he said, look, we've just got to continue. We just got to, get on with business, etc. And on the back of that, I ended up taking him out to lunch, and we had a great chat about all things habit building. He was the coach of a soccer team, and really just got to know him personally, because at the end of the day, he was still a stakeholder. And so if you take a leaf out of, say, a counselor's book, when you need help, you go to a counselor, for instance, they set parameters upfront in the relationship to let that person know what the relationship's going to look like. And a salesperson should do the same thing. Anytime they meet with a stakeholder, they should put their line in the sand. They should shine themselves in a position that they are an authority, and that their job is to bridge the gap between strategy and execution. The other thing to add there is, number one, set the parameters of the relationship straight. Number two, the first focus in any engagement, when you get a new account or when you get a new territory, anything like that, the first thing a rep should do is go out and focus on executive engagement, so that what happens in the organization, this is what I call the over the guard wall method. Because if you think about the dynamic of that, if you go out and meet an executive, and we can talk about strategies for actually creating compelling content to get in front of these executives. But let's say we're sitting in front of an executive, and we understand what the executive wants. We understand what their problems are. We understand their world. We understand, one of the great questions I asked the CRO, which created $20 million of opportunity, Pat, was I said to him, where are you spending time right now that you shouldn't be spending time? And he came back with some really great intel, some content. He came back with telling me the stakeholders that I needed to talk to in order to solve those problems. And so what happened is, after that email, I sent him an email and said, look, here are the things that we talked about. Here are the top 4 things that are priorities for you. And here are the people that I should speak to in order to solve those problems for you. That email got forwarded to those 4 people, and immediately they opened the door to me to sit down and have a conversation with them. In fact, one of his direct reports met with me. This is pre-COVID. I went out and I sat in his office, and he came out to greet me. And I reached out my hand, again, pre-COVID, reached out my hand to shake his hand. And I said, look, thank you so much for meeting me. I'm going to call him Rob. Thanks so much for meeting me, Rob. And he said, well, I don't really have a choice if my boss tells me I have to. And so that's the power of executive engagement. So instead of starting bottom up, yeah, oh, yes. I laughed because I thought this is just, it's so powerful. It's so powerful because while everybody out there is focusing on bottom up, I'm out there focusing on top down. And I start with executives, they open the door, and then I meet the people that I should be meeting anyway, so, influencers, but they can never get angry with me for meeting executives. So when people say to me, I don't want to piss off my stakeholder, what that means is that they're not going to be plugged into strategy. What that means is if they're not plugged into strategy, they're not going to have a broader scope or broader perspective of how their technology can actually solve their problems. Because the reality is, Pat, a lot of salespeople understand their products, but they don't understand how that translates into the customer's domain, into the customer's world, the customer problem they're trying to solve, the perfect solution that they want. And so if they stay where they are, boxed in, then they're just not going to be able to add much value. They're not going to get the right sales results. They're not going to hit their quota, and they're never going to ascend their careers.
I totally agree with you, because I think it's really critically important that we get the leadership on board. But with that said, getting the leadership engaged isn't necessarily all that easy, is it? What recommendations, what advice do you have for salespeople to connect with these executives? Because they're not on LinkedIn a lot. They don't answer their phones. They don't read a lot of their emails. Sometimes they've got assistants and associates doing this stuff for them. What advice have you got for a salesperson to connect and build a relationship with a C-suite executive?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's probably two fundamental strategies that have always served me well. I would say 90% of the time when I want to get in front of an executive, I can get in front of an executive, and it's due to these two things. The first thing is influence the influencer. And so every executive has a team of people around them who he or she allows to influence them. And so sometimes it's an approach of getting in front of that person or pivoting from a relationship that you already have with that person in order to get to the executive table. So that's one particular method. The other one is, and I can touch more information on that in a moment. One of the ones that works really well is when the executive has a peer relationship with someone that you know. So sometimes, in the case that I talked about, I met with the chief risk officer of a tier one bank, top four bank, multi-billion-dollar company. This guy was earning $3 million a year. So every one of his hours was worth over $1,000 per hour. So you can imagine, as I'm sitting there, he's already counting the dollars that he's wasting by sitting with me unless I add some significant value. And so what we did, Pat, to get in front of that person was he knew one of the other stakeholders in my business, that they had a previous relationship from a few years ago. So what I did was I actually created an email for his executive assistant to go to the chief risk officer's executive assistant, firstly bridging the gap and saying, hey, it's been, let's say a year. It's been a year since we worked together on XYZ project. So it has to be very relevant. The email has to be extremely relevant to the person. And anytime anybody opens their email and is about to send an email, they've got to think of the word relevancy. How is this relevant to them, right? So in that email, it was like, look, we worked together on XYZ project. It's been, a year since I saw you. The next word that has made me a lot of money, Pat, is the word synergy, because everybody wants to look for synergy. Everybody wants to look for opportunities to have 1 + 1 = 3, which is one of the definitions of synergy. It's 1 + 1 = 3. And so if you craft an email that says, look, we already have an existing affiliation, can we, this is what's been going on in my world. Look, I'm over here now, and I just wanted to catch up for a 30-minute synergy session to see how we can align. It's that simple. Instead of saying, hey, I have a product that does X, Y, Z, and here are some of the features that it does, and hey, I'd really like some time in your calendar to see if you want to buy something from me, which is how most people craft their emails. That's not going to get cut through, right? Nope. That's not going to get cut through.
Sales Babble is sponsored by Vidyard. Vidyard is an easy-to-use yet powerful video solution that makes it simple to create videos, host them ad-free, share them with others, and track their performance. Whether you're recording a video for one person or sharing it with the world on your website, it's easy to manage your video content. Vidyard's solution is built for business with robust analytics, integrations with top enterprise tools, and customization options that answer businesses' unique needs. But you may be asking yourself, what's this got to do with sales? Well, with Vidyard, you can differentiate your emails by putting a face to a name when prospecting, following up, and demos. You can use the same CRM and outreach tools that you use every day to build content the entire sales team can leverage and track analytics to know which videos convert best. Sign up for a free Vidyard account today by going to vidyard.com/babble, and as a bonus, get their high conversion virtual sales playbook. Again, go to vidyard.com/babble. That's BABBLE.
The other one, which I use, and sometimes, Pat, I use these strategies just to get the no. Like, let's be frank. Because if I get the no, sometimes when they email me back, they'll give me the person to speak to. And that's even more powerful than speaking to that person directly. So another example I'll give is I wanted to meet with the CEO of a tier one telco. Again, multi-billion-dollar company, guys on multi-million-dollar income per year. I had a look through some of the press releases that they had been making, and I found what he was really passionate about. And what he was really passionate about was Indigenous communities. Then I saw a statement that they put out in the press that they actually received a very large fine to the tune of multi-million dollars. And what he did was he actually went, he posted something on LinkedIn, and it was a video showing his remorse, his concern for the situation, the fact that he's diligently going to work on this problem until it's solved. And so what I did was I crafted an email to him and said, hey, I'm going to give him a name as well. I'm going to give him the name Bobby, right? I said, hey, Bobby, I came across your video on LinkedIn where you were talking about Indigenous communities, and you know what? I think that what you did was an incredibly what was the word I used? Was a completely inspiring leadership. You have inspiring leadership traits, because a lot of leaders wouldn't want to put themselves in the public persona and talk openly and emotionally as you did. But I'll tell you what, Bobby, I'm really passionate about the same things as you, and we're actually involved in the same industry, which is cyber. This is a cybersecurity opportunity. And I said, I'm actually involved in cybersecurity as well. I'd love to just get 15 minutes with you to just talk cyber and see what synergies may arise. That was it, right? And then he came back and said, look, Oscar, really appreciate your thoughtful and an insightful email. We are very passionate about Aboriginal communities, and here are the things that we're doing in these communities, 1, 2, 3. I can't meet with you. However, I'm going to pass you to my colleague, Matt, who runs the entire cybersecurity practice for me. And he gave me his contact details. So the key message there, Pat, is that even though I didn't get in front of him, and I know that maybe it takes 6 or 7 no's to get in front of him, so I know that over the next, say, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, every 6 months or so, I'm going to send him another email and see if we can catch up with a different slant based on what he's been doing online, based on what value he's been adding to the world. And I'm going to continue to try to get in front of him. But what that did in the first instance was it completely opened the door to the whole. I mean, I got around the whole, every single person that is anyone. I forwarded that email that CEO sent to me. Why? Because in the subject line, they see that their CEO's endorsed it. If they scroll down, they can see that the CEO's wrote to me personally. All of a sudden, I have some authority, and I'm not a nobody. I'm not a chump. I can actually have a sophisticated business conversation with people if they just scroll down and see that message. So there are a couple of things that people can do, Pat, that will really help them open the doors into the account.
I love that. I love that a lot. And I could certainly see how them kind of more or less being the concierge for you of sorts, so they're not the one providing the service, but they're sending you to the right person. So
I love
let's
that.
say
I love that.
Yeah, you can see that. Of course, CEO may not like that. I'm the concierge. I don't think so. Anyway, to get back on track, let's just say the value that you're providing the organization is clearly there, whatever product or service that you have. But a lot of people struggle with getting that final close. What is the trick for that? How do we get people to say, yes, I want to sign up?
Yeah, that's a great question. The sales process is a series of yeses where they're committing to the next step. And what the salesperson needs to really do is understand every single component of the customer's dynamic. What's the sign-off process? What does their business case look like? Who do they need to go to for approval? Who actually needs to sign the contract? How does the funding get released? And so the model that I use in every sales situation is the 3C model. I did a lot of coaching with Hugh Hilton of the Hilton family. He's a real estate billionaire and is doing very large, complex negotiations and deals all the time. He's also the CEO of Alvarez Marcel, which is a mergers and acquisitions venture capitalist turnaround firm. And the model that he taught me, which I've really taken into my life in every single situation, it's really helped me, is the 3C model. What is the 3C model? The first C stands for curiosity. So you have to be very curious about your customer, and anytime you get nervous or anytime that the salesperson starts to think, what do I say next? Fall back to curiosity. Get really curious about your customer and understand everything about their world. The second C is creativity. How can I creatively use all of this information that I've gotten to position my product or service in the appropriate way, right? The last C is commitment. What is the commitment to the next step? So I never leave any sales situation or any meeting without those 3 C's being executed. Where's my curiosity? Where's my creativity? And where's the curiosity? And so if the sales rep follows those three frameworks and gets very curious, understands the dynamic, understand what the sign-off process is, when it's going to happen, then they'll be in a better position to continue to push the deal towards the end of the goal line. The other thing is, the second thing that's really important is I implemented what I call the weekly scrum. And so what that is an accountability call. If I've got a large deal on the table that is very strategic of nature, that is complex because it has multiple signatories and multiple sign-offs, because it's more than a multi-million-dollar deal, then I'll set up a weekly scrum with the party that's actually representing the buy. And so I set that up. This is how I frame it. I say, look, I've got a big team. I need to be able to pull in resources at any time. So what I'm going to do is block out all of our calendars every single week, including yours. And if at any time at all you need us, we'll be there. And how can the customer say no to that? So there's been times where the customer will say to me, oh, I need some, this technical documentation for a business case I'm writing. Oh, well, luckily we've got a meeting this Wednesday. How about we talk about it then? And then I'll pull in the resources that we need in order to help serve the customer. And so what that does is helps. Yeah, it helps me keep my finger on the pulse. It gives the customer a weekly reminder that we're there for them and we're waiting. So the customer ends up feeling bad sometimes because, and they will cancel the scrum sometimes. Like, there's been times in our negotiations where the customer will cancel it 3 weeks in a row. But what will happen on that fourth week is that they'll come onto that scrum and I'll write to them and say, look, there's no need for the rest of the team. How about you and I just catch up one-on-one and just make sure we're in alignment? And then we'll talk for 30 minutes. He'll tell me everything. He'll tell me who he's been talking to. He'll tell me who's approved the process. He'll tell me who reports to who. And we'll start to really push towards, when we get together, we're pushing towards that vision, that ideal vision of working together. And so there's some of the strategies, Pat, that people can use to hold their customers accountable, to keep them honest, and to make sure they've got their finger on the pulse for the deal.
That's really showing a buying sign. If you can talk them into that.
Yeah.
If you talk them into, look, we're going to do a weekly meeting and we're going to talk about this deal and what it's going to take to move it over. And to a certain degree, they've already bought into you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. That's kind of more like account management. You're almost treating them like an existing account, and this is like an upsell within it, but it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I do this all the time for new business as well. And it is just that mutual accountability. The other thing I'll add in here just very, very quickly, there's one thing that really frustrates me when I come across sales reps that send their customers emails saying, hey, let's catch up next week. What works for you? And that really irks me because it means that the sales rep's putting all the thinking and all the hard work on their customers. We have a practice in our business, and any sales rep that we work with, it's mandatory that whenever they're asking for an email, they send 3 times that they're available so that the customer knows that that person has put in the effort and it hasn't been a throwaway, hey, are you free? I came across this recently in one of the engagements that I work on. I'm helping another rep actually expand his territory. And I saw an email that he sent and said, hey, customer, I want to catch up with you next week. When are you free? And I got my EA to jump in and said, no, you've got to take control of this now because this guy is obviously not competent at setting up meetings. You go over the top of that email. You go and send 3 times that we're all free. And then you're going to send him the calendar invite to block out one of those times. Because what that does is it forces the customer to decide whether they're free or not rather than just ignoring you. And the customer accepted the invite, and we were all able to meet. Now, if I was to wait for this other rep to get the meeting across the line, we'd still be waiting 3-4 weeks later because the customer would continue to ignore the email. Because now, if you think about it from the customer's perspective, they have to jump into their calendar, they have to look at what time they're free. Then they have to write down 3 of the times. I mean, they don't have time for this. As sales reps, it's our responsibility to make the customers' lives as easy as possible. If we can do their bloody job, then we should be doing their job. That's how much value we've got to add. So I thought I'd add that little bit because that's one of the things that frustrates me about a lot of salespeople, Pat.
I've always been a strong proponent of before you leave the sales meeting to schedule the next sales meeting. Get on their calendar. So I'm a proponent of that. Oscar, if people wanted to connect with you, people wanted to follow up with you and meet you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, great. Thanks for that question. Look, I have a 1 hour workshop which is free that people can consume. It's called the $3 Million LinkedIn Playbook: How to Do 7-Figure Deals on LinkedIn with Zero Ad Spend. So if people don't have the time or the money or the wherewithal to invest in marketing, they can use this playbook in order to start generating those 7-figure deals. So they can go to 8figures.growthlymarketing.com. Or they can just go to my website, which is oscar-chavez.com. That's not underscore. That's oscar-chavez.com. And they can connect with me there.
Excellent. If you could leave us one tip that we can execute on this week, what would it be?
The tip would be to focus this week on executive engagement. The thing to realize about executive engagement is that it's all in the subject. It's all in the subject. So sometimes writing an email to an executive will take me 45 minutes because I'm literally imagining, I'm visualizing myself, I'm taking myself to a place where that person is sitting across the desk from me. And I'm going to watch them open my email and I'm going to watch them judge me, because that level of let's say fear of being judged really can help you create great emails, because you're really visualizing the customer experience. You're putting yourself in their shoes. And so if you're going to spend some time this week creating, firstly, identify which executives you want to meet with, then block out a 30-minute calendar and spend some time writing an email to that person. And the subject line needs to be very powerful. It needs to be very different to any other subject line that is in their inbox. It needs to be very different. And then once they've finished sending that email, what they should do, Pat, is they should go into their sent items. They should open that email. They should click on the 3 little dots somewhere on Office or even on Gmail. And there's an option there that says convert message into calendar. They should do that and then send them an invite 2 weeks in the future. And you either watch that meeting get declined or watch that meeting get accepted, but your email will be ignored. And then once if you get declined, you can write back to them and say, look, I'm sorry that time didn't work for you. Here are 3 more times that I'm available. And then eventually they'll tell you to, go somewhere else, or they'll introduce you to the right person if your email is good enough. But that's my tip for this week, Pat. If people really focus on that executive engagement, their career will absolutely go to the next level.
Oscar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Pat.
To connect with Oscar and to get a copy of his free book, Billionaire Secrets: Exponentially Grow Your Sales Revenue by Creating Unlimited Marketing Budgets, you can find those at the show notes at www.salesbabble.com, as well as our sponsor, Vidyard, video solutions for sales professionals. Next week, my guest is my good friend Diane Helbig, who's the Chief Improvement Catalyzer at Helbig Enterprises. Her practical advice will skyrocket your sales immediately. Did you find value in this podcast? If so, could you do me a favor and share this with one person, one friend, one colleague who's excited to grow their sales? On whatever app you're using to listen to this podcast right now, there's a share button that will send a text or a message or an email or a social media post. It'd mean all the world to me if you could forward this podcast to just one person who has the same curiosity that you do. Do it right now. Okay, thanks. So until next week, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.